Hello everyone, welcome back to the weekly meditation challenge. I am switching things up a bit. There have been sort of like topics floating back and forth over the last year or so that we've been doing this, and I thought it might be really interesting for us to explore a classic text together and spend a full year doing so. And this classic text is known as the 59 Mind Training Slogans. And they were systematized by a gentleman known as Atisha Dipankara Srijanana, just commonly referred to as Atisha, who was a master in the Kadampa school of Tibetan Buddhism. And these are 59 slogans that are very helpful for us in terms of developing bodhicitta, open or awake heart. So over the next year, I might double up on some of them, or we might go a full 59 weeks on this particular topic, but they're quite interesting. I think you'll enjoy them a great deal. So Atisha lived during a time of great social and political unrest. He lived from about 982 AD to 1054, approximately. And these are not trainings that he developed, but he systematized and popularized them. These were commonly known as Lodro. So lo is in Lodro, mind, and then zhang as training, so mind training slogans. And previously to his work, these trainings were held close to the chest by the monastic tradition, but he saw how relevant they would be to us lay practitioners, so he made them accessible to the world at large. So the mind training slogans are very interesting, but the main thing that I want to say here is I want to remind everyone about the time of the Buddha and how the Buddha, when he attained enlightenment, actually didn't go out and just tell all of his followers, here's exactly what you need to do. The very first thing that happened when the Buddha went out and sought the company of the ascetics that he previously meditated alongside, and they saw him, and they were inspired by him, and they requested teachings, the first thing he did wasn't, here are my 10 commandments. It wasn't, here's what you do on Sundays and don't do on Sundays. And it wasn't any of the dogmatic stuff. He literally issued an invitation to them. And he said, come and see for yourself. You want to be like me? You want to become awake? Come and see for yourself. So I mention this because the mind training slogans are very interesting, sure, but it's more about us experiencing these teachings for ourselves. We contemplate the mind training slogans as a means for us bringing them into our own experience. We contemplate what they personally might mean to us, and then we go forward. So that's my disclaimer of what the mind training slogans are for. They're for us to contemplate and bring into our own life. And the first one, mind training slogan number 1, is called First Train in the Preliminaries. There's various ways over the Tibetan Buddhist system that this has been thought of. Sometimes it's thought of as calling upon the teacher. Sometimes it's thought of as seeking refuge. The common understanding, and I'm actually pulling from a text called Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, where he talks about the 4 preliminaries that are often associated with this particular slogan. So first, train in the preliminaries. The preliminaries are 1, the preciousness of human life; 2, the reality of change and death; 3, the entrapment of karma; and 4, the intensity of samsara overall. So 1, there's many ways to think of the preciousness of human life. There's the fact that from a traditional Tibetan Buddhist point of view, there are many, many different realms that we might be born into. Hungry ghost realm, animal realm, etc., etc. Maybe you're not so into the reincarnation thing. That is okay. You don't have to be for this. It's the idea that we happen to be born into a human life, and that's actually quite rare in the grand scheme of things. But particularly it's said that it's rare because we are able to practice the Dharma. So this is the first aspect of preciousness that I would like to mention. We are able to practice the Dharma. Animals are not necessarily able to practice the Dharma. They could hear it, but it's not like your cat's going to sit down and meditate one-pointedly on the breath. Maybe your cat does it, my cat does not. My cat gets distracted by its own tail. Similarly, if you were born into the hungry ghost realm or the jealous god realm, your mind is not turned towards the Dharma in the same way. The fact that you and I are here, you're listening to this, means that you have a preciousness in this human life because you're actually able to take in, meditate, contemplate reflect on these things. So that's one of the reasons it's precious. The other reason its preciousness in this grand scheme of traditional Tibetan Buddhism is said that the likelihood of us attaining a human birth is based in this very traditional analogy. Imagine the world is just one big orb, and it's entirely covered by water, no land. And in that giant world of ocean, there is a tortoise. And that tortoise comes up for air once every 100 years. And then floating on this surface of the ocean, this world of ocean, is a yoke. This is a traditional analogy. So it's like a yoke is something that would go around the head of an oxen. So it's about yay big. And the likelihood of the tortoise coming up every 100 years and someday eventually poking its head through that yoke that floats on an ocean the size of the world, the likelihood of that tortoise making its head up through the yoke is more likely to happen than us actually attaining a precious human birth. That is the rarity with which this birth is traditionally spoken of. So it's incredibly rare in terms of our time and our low percentage that we would actually have a human birth. Also the preciousness in terms of the fact that we're able to practice the Dharma. And the last thing I want to mention in terms of the preciousness of our human birth, if you're not into the whole multiple lifetime thing, is that you're able to access this. Either you're hearing it or you're reading it, and there's other aspects of your human birth that are probably quite precious, such as your ability, if you're able to walk, or you're able to move your arms, or you're able to eat. And there's many things that we can appreciate about our human form. This is all the first thing that we could reflect on. We can train in the preliminaries. To train in this basically means to actually reflect on this and realize how rare and delightful this life is. The second aspect here of these 4 preliminaries is the reality of impermanence and in particular death. So it's said that death comes without warning and that this body will be a corpse. We do not know the time that we will die. So this buys into or follows on, builds upon the preciousness of our human life. We should take advantage of it because we do not know how long we have. We do not know how long we have on this earth. We know people who have lived very long lifetimes. We know people who have died prematurely. We don't know what will happen with us. And everything changes. It's not just us that might die, it's everyone around us, and it's also our circumstances will constantly change, our job situations will change, our homes will change, all these sorts of things. So everything is impermanent here. And we can reflect on that to realize that we can't rely on external factors for our everlasting happiness, because those external factors are going to change in some shape or form. And then finally, the only thing we can rely on is actually our ability to wake up to what's going on right now, so we can appreciate things as they are in this moment, knowing that they will change. The third, in addition to the preciousness of your human life, the reality of impermanence and death, the third thing is the entrapment of karma. The short form is that we reap what we sow. So if you continue to practice mindless speech, to build on last week's video, or anger in various forms, jealousy, if we perpetuate these things on or off the cushion, then we're going to live a life that is based in anger and jealousy and mindless speech. So this is not what we want to do. It's sort of like Sakyong Nippon Rinpoche has once beautifully illustrated karma when he said, it's like trees. We plant plums, we're going to get a plum tree. If we plant peaches, we're going to get peaches. We get a peach tree. We just literally, it may not be a one-to-one equation, but whatever we put into the ground, we're going to get back in some shape or form. So this is karma. We can reflect on how we live our life and what we put out there, because we're going to surround ourselves with it when we do that. And the fourth and final aspect here is the intensity of samsara. And I've spoken about this in the past, but very briefly, there's the suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering. Suffering of suffering is that everything in our life is, we go through a cycle of our own suffering. There's birth and old age and sickness and death. I don't like old age as the translation. I prefer aging, actually. It's often referred to as old age, but it's like any part of our body changing, morphing. It's uncomfortable for us. like our teenage years when we're breaking out and we're getting boobs and things like that. Like that's uncomfortable time. Aging is uncomfortable. The process of birth is obviously uncomfortable for many parties concerned. Sickness is always uncomfortable. Everything from having a cold to having a life-changing illness. And then, of course, death I've already talked about, but they really keep hammering that one into us, don't they? So that's the suffering of suffering, birth, old age, sickness, and death. Or birth, aging, sickness, and death. Suffering of change, this aspect of impermanence, that everything that we know changes. Everything will change. And then all pervasive suffering, everything from having a hangnail to holding a loved one's hand in the hospital. There's lots of forms of suffering that just are marks of our condition, of being human. Always yearning for pleasure, always trying to shy away from pain. This is just part of who we are, and it's us manipulating our situation actually causes us more pain. So why do we think about these things? We think about these things as motivation for our practice. We can see how precious our time is, how we don't necessarily know how much time we have or how our circumstances might align, change, and how what we're putting into this is what we're getting out. Then we might actually be able to overcome samsara. We might actually be able to wake up to the present moment and have a life based in peace, mindfulness, and compassion. So this is why we first train in the preliminaries, and we contemplate them. This is the weekly meditation challenge still, so I wanted to mention that the challenge aspect here is in the coming week, I invite you to contemplate one or more of these each day. The preciousness of human life, the reality of impermanence and death, the entrapment of karma, or the intensity of samsara. And see, but if you can do that right before you start meditating, whatever your daily practice might be, if you can contemplate one of those things, and see if it motivates you further to apply the discipline to your practice. Okay, good luck, and I'm looking forward to diving into these mind training slogans over the course of the year. Take good care.